So let's begin with the very first topic, which is a data cloud review. So what is data cloud? Well, good question. I'm glad you asked. Data cloud is the tool that Salesforce create to help you understand your customers better. It gives you a full customer 360 view of each and every one of your customers. Regardless if the information that you're after is based information from leads, which could be in Salesforce or other tools, maybe information about orders, things like could be like in SAP, for example, maybe commerce, which could be information that it's being imported from Shopify or Magneto or others. What about fulfillment? Things that are coming, like, for example, from FedEx. What about invoices? What about invoices? Maybe information is coming from QuickBooks. Or payments from Stripe, from Square, from PayPal. What about service and support? Maybe from Zendesk. Right? Because Salesforce understands, although we don't want to do that, but we understand that, just kidding, that uh, enterprises like yourself will have multiple different sources of information. Sources of information that can help understand the customer, that help you have a complete view of the customer. And that's what Data Cloud allows you to do. Bring all the data, right? In addition to that, things like doesn't matter if the name of the person that you're trying to get information, your customer, in some systems maybe store as Rob or Robert or Bobby or R, or maybe even the address. These two addresses are exactly the same thing. 123 Pizza Street West, West, right? But when you normalize this data, um, then it actually becomes the same address, kind of on the same idea as the phone numbers, right? So different data, different shapes. Data Cloud has tools that allows you to identify that the data is actually made for the same particular customer. So you want to bring all this data from different systems, regardless where the data is, and put it into a Data Cloud. But once you put it in Data Cloud, you want to actually create buckets of data for each customer. So let's say you have 1,000 customers, you should end up with 1,000 buckets. Sure, you're going to end up with 999 or 1,001 because data is never perfect. But if you end up with 20 or 3 million, well, maybe there's something that you have to revisit in your Data Cloud in order to align it, because you're either putting in the same bucket information for customers that are not the same, or a customer has multiple buckets. There should be a one-to-one relationship. And the process of putting the data into the buckets, or the bucketifying, that's a word I just made up, is called identity resolution. It's creating rule sets, it's unification, and those rule sets consist of two different types of rules. You have the matching rules and you have the resolution rules. The matching rules are the ones that says, okay, this record is for this customer, this record is for the same customer, they go into the same bucket. Those are your matching rules. The resolution rules, it's once you have 1,000 buckets, okay, or 1,000,000 buckets, or 10 million, depending on how many customers you have. You need to say, okay, please tell me which bucket belongs to Robert Smith. So what we're going to do in order to identify each bucket is we're going to hang a yellow label to each and every one of those buckets. Now, this yellow label will say this bucket belongs to Robert Smith. What's important to understand is that that yellow label, although it may look like a golden record, it is not. It looks like a golden record, but it is not. But what is a golden record? Well, let's take a look at a different picture here. We have 4 rows of data for a particular customer. And from each of these fields, we're going to pick one field out of the 4, not necessarily from the same row, and bring that field into a golden record. So yes, somehow that yellow label that we're talking about that gets created for the bucket can look like a golden record. It actually is not. And it is not, the Data Cloud is not about creating golden records. Data Cloud is about creating buckets of data, buckets that represent all the information we know about a particular customer. The problem with a golden record is that we lose information. And we lose information because we choose one field or one record per field, or one value, which is the value of a field among different records of the same customer, but we disregard the other 3. Okay. With Data Cloud, we don't disregard data. We don't lose information. We keep all the information. Where do we keep all the information? We keep it on the bucket. And what is the process in Data Cloud to work with that data? So this slide I call the Data Cloud data flow, because it indicates how the data flows in Data Cloud. We start with the connection, where we connect to different sources from Salesforce. We can connect from different sources from cloud storage. Maybe we don't bring the data in, but we reference the data with what is called zero copy federation. If you're a developer, we can use the mobile and web SDK, or we can also bring through APIs. So you can test this in Postman, for example, so they can build your integrations. And then other systems can also be brought over if you especially if you use MuleSoft. So once we are connected, we're gonna ingest the data. Okay. So what is ingestion? Well, there's 2 types of ingestion. You have batch ingestion. Think about this, scheduling the data like once a month, once an hour, once a day, where you bring a lot of information that has happened during that period of time into a Data Cloud. That is batch ingestion. But there's also a very important aspect of ingestion, or type of ingestion, which is called the streaming ingestion. The streaming ingestion, it's based on an event. So when something happens, we want to bring the data that is related to that something. For example, when we send an email, when the user opens the email, when it clicks on the email, when it goes into our e-commerce site, when it puts products into a shopping basket, when it drops the shopping basket, things that we care about, and that happens in a particular event. And for that particular event, we are going to be monitoring. So we send the data that is particular to that particular event to the cloud. And with that, we have, or in order to determine what we're bringing, we create something called a data stream. A data stream in Data Cloud can be enhanced with formula fields and system fields, and that becomes your DLO. Okay, so the DLOs are your source data. Once you have ingested the data, then you want to harmonize. What is harmonization means? Well, Data Cloud is going to give you a data model, so it's called the Data Cloud data model. And your job is going to be to map your DLOs into the DMOs that are defined inside that data model. So you say, okay, for this particular field from my source, my DLO, copy that value, or maybe copy that reference into this particular field in this particular DMO. Then it comes the process of unification, which is putting the customers inside buckets. Okay, that is based on rule sets. For example, there's two types of rule sets: matching rules and reconciliation rules. Matching will determine what goes into the same bucket, and then the resolution is basically what's going to be hanging from that, or what's going to be printed on the label that hangs from that particular bucket. That is also called the identity resolution. Once we unify, now we are ready to actually start working with the data. So we can analyze, predict, and act on the data. Type of things that we can do in here is we can do some analytics, dashboards, reports, type of things. You can do predictions with Einstein. You can query that data from Salesforce via Apex or flows, so that you can work on your own apps and actions. You can also enrich your contact record, for example, so that your users view the data from the different systems into the contact record with things like copy fields and related lists. Or we can send the data into different systems. Typically, traditionally, Data Cloud has been used for by marketers to be able to send the data to Marketing Cloud. And that's kind of historically what it has been, but it's much, much, much more than that. For example, you now have unstructured data that you can do with Agentforce or search RAG PDF documents, and we call that RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. So there's so much more that you can do with Data Cloud, but we're just gonna keep this picture quite simple for now. All right, so that concludes the first chapter. Thank you for watching this. If you liked it and you want to watch more resources like this, make sure that you subscribe, you like the video, you follow me on LinkedIn, read my blogs, and if you want to, and I would appreciate, buy me a virtual cup of coffee. So I'll wait for you on the next chapter, which deals with um, uh, making mistakes is easy, fixing them is not.